Hello, everybody. How's everyone's South by going so far? Good, yeah. South by Southwest, let's go. I'm Rebecca Feferman. I am the founder of the FefCo, a consulting business that does sports business strategy and etc. Once upon a time, I was the founder of this here track here at South by Southwest, which was called South by Sports at the time. And it's really exciting and very cool to be back here 10 years later in a very full circle moment to moderate this panel with these gentlemen here. So please join me in welcoming them. I'd love to introduce Ryan Kalil, former All-Pro NFL center, Blake Griffin, six-time NBA All-Star, and together they are the co-founders of Mortal Media, the LA-based film and television production company, which most recently was behind the White Men Can't Jump reboot on Hulu and Apple TV Plus's sci-fi dramedy Hello Tomorrow. Please give them a big welcome. Done with that card, great. Well, thank you guys so much for being here. I would love for you to tell the crowd here a little bit about why we're here, how you started in this transition from sports to entertainment in starting your company, Mortal Media. So obviously it starts from a place of passion. Blake, I think you've spoken a bit about your passion for comedy. You were an intern at Funny or Die. Tell us a little bit about that. Was there something, a moment or two during that internship during the lockout that really led to sparking this passion for filmmaking for you?
Yeah, I think early on, sort of the way I got into it, besides like just a love for comedy, I anytime I had to do an endorsement deal and do a commercial, I asked like, we just make it funny? Like I don't want to do the typical sports athlete endorsement where you're just like lifting weights. And you're like, every day I work hard. And so that was just like, that was all I wanted to do. I started to slowly like restructure most of my endorsement deals to be able to write and then produce. By the end, I was usually producing most of my commercials. So that's kind of like how I started there. My time at Funny or Die was awesome. It was just basically 3 weeks of me going in there and being like, all right, what stupid video can I make today? And I just loved like the entire process, not just shooting the video, not just the outcome, but starting with an idea, sitting in a room and just, riffing on ideas. And I really enjoy like spending time. The great thing about playing in the NBA is you're surrounded by incredibly talented people who have gotten to like the pinnacle of their sport, and you're inspired by that every day. And even like a place like Funny or Die, where I got to work with like a director who was really, really good, a DP who was really, really good. I mean, you can learn something from everybody in every field, and I'm always inspired by that. So as a producer, getting to be around people who are at the top of their fields in their respective field of film is super inspiring for me. So it's been very rewarding.
Was it difficult to get your deals rewritten to include a writer credit? Like, was that a push for you to have to?
Honestly, I didn't really care much about the writer credit. I just wanted
to participate, even to let them have you participate in the process. Were they like, sure, that's cute? Like,
yeah, sure at first, but then once I sort of did it more, I did some Kia commercials for a long time, and I had a great relationship with the ad agency there, and they let me come in and sit in there and throw out some ideas, and that's sort of how it started. So just building those relationships like early on was key to being able to have a little bit more creative control over the stuff I was doing.
Nice. And Ryan, you grew up a big fan of genre films, Star Wars being one of them. You saw behind the scenes of the making of Star Wars and got really hooked on the stop motion animation side of it, and even dabbled in making some of stop motion when you were a kid. So how did that lead you from stop motion animation at home when you were a kid to playing in the NFL to now making films as a producing partner?
Well, I hated sports as a kid. I did not like sports. I played it, for me, my old man played collegiately. He was in the pros for a little bit, and he was a high school football coach. So I knew I had to play. I felt compelled to play because I didn't want to let the old man down. But yeah, I was such a fanboy at an early age, and I think the behind the scenes Star Wars stuff that Lucasfilm put out really allowed me to understand for the first time, there's a whole village of people that actually put this together. And it's still, even watching it, it felt so unattainable because there were huge sets and special effects and equipment and all kinds of crazy stuff that I couldn't wrap my head around. But for whatever reason, the Phil Tippett stop motion stuff I thought, well, that's something I could do myself at home, and it seemed so simple. And so, the point of entry there was literally just, clay and some kind of camera that could sort of take frame by frame shots of the motion. And so I just sort of taught myself how to do it and made a ton of videos at home, and I just loved it. Like, I loved the passing of that time and wanted nothing to do with sports. And my dad was great. He was not one of those dads who was like a crazy sports dad, but he was adamant I had to do something outside of just sitting in my room all day and playing with clay, which I think is probably a healthy parental advice. And so I ended up falling in love with sports later on. But I knew at a very young age that I wanted to get into storytelling for a living somehow, some way. And so that was sort of my entry into it.
Do you remember the plots of some of your first stop motion films?
I mean, they were mostly like weird creatures and things based off of family members. And so I think I was like weirdly working through stuff by playing out, acting out things. So I think my dad and my brother were definitely main characters a lot. They were always getting on my nerves about something. And then, I had action figures, so I would play, I would figure out ways to rig them up so that I could play out like, Batman scenes and Star Wars scenes. And so, yeah.
That's great. And then obviously the two of you played sports at the highest level of your game, but you met back in 2010. How did you connect? Was it like, pro athlete speed dating? What was the process?
We met through mutual friends. Had a beautiful lunch together, I think, for the first time when we met. And then we both just, like we talked about, we both kind of had projects going for a while. And then eventually decided to, why don't we team up and do this together? And, in a perfect world, we find that intersection of comedy and fanboy stuff, sci-fi, whatever it is. But at the same time, we've learned to like expand. There's some projects that he, go
fanboy
for it.
Stuff.
Yeah, which I love, but like I spend much more time in the comedy section of our company. So
he's always yelling "nerd alert" every time I bring something in.
Like who let the nerd in here, guys?
So then you meet in 2010, you have a great lunch, you talk about comedy, you talk about fanboy stuff, you start working on things together. 2016, you form Mortal Media. That was a long time ago, and we're starting to talk about it now, which I think speaks to volumes to how serious you guys were taking this, how much you were interested in really creating stories that mattered to you, that you were going to enjoy doing. But obviously, you probably discovered that the sports industry operates a little differently than the entertainment industry. In sports, as an athlete, you just have to be good at what you do, you have to be great at what you do. That's the thing that speaks volumes. In the entertainment industry, often there's who do you know, right? So you guys have talked about how Thomas Tull from Legendary Pictures was one of the first people who really took you seriously as filmmakers. Can you talk a little bit about how that led to the development from, just having a few things you're cooking to what Mortal Media really became?
Yeah, I mean, Thomas was like very instrumental. He was like one of the first people that really took us seriously, as filmmakers. And we had a pretty loose first look deal, but really our goal when we started, and we talked about this a lot before we actually started this company, was in the first 2-3 years, we really just kind of kept our heads down. We didn't announce that we had a production company. We set up meetings all over town. And part of that is, we used our careers to try to get into rooms that we probably had no business getting into, and making sure people knew that this was like a passion play for us, and it's not just a vanity project. We didn't want to just like slap our names on something and say, yeah, I'm a producer, I have a production company. So laying the groundwork was super important to us, to be taken seriously, and as you can imagine, I think we got pitched on anything and everything sports, and we tried to stay away from sports a little bit. Obviously, White Men Can't Jump is about basketball, but truly it's a bromance. It's a love story to the game of basketball, but basketball is sort of the B story there. So that was just kind of like our plan for the first really 2 years. We didn't really put a time on it, but that was kind of how we approached starting this company. We just felt like that was the most genuine way, and that was the way that you can really convince people that we're very serious about this.
I think like anything, as Blake and I were sort of discovering the things we were doing individually on our own and really sort of considered putting it under the same roof. And Thomas Toll was somebody who just casually was sort of pitching that idea to us and gave us a whole slew of reasons why he thought that would be smart. But you sort of like, you go into a thing with sort of all these kind of broad dreams and ideas of what it's going to be. And then as you start kind of having conversations, you start really figuring out, well, okay, here's sort of the entry for us. Here are the things that are going to be difficult. And one of the things we realized early on was just the stigma of being athletes. I mean, the town is very much a tight-knit community, and we knew we were going to be outsiders pretty early. And so we kind of sat down and thought, okay, well, what's the best way to approach it? What's the best way to fight that stigma, to be taken serious? Because it was like right around the time a lot of the sports agencies were starting to merge with the media agencies. And so you had that intersection there that was happening, and a lot of it was more for access and marketing purposes. So you had a lot of the Hollywood side coming to the sports side and saying, hey, do you want to ask your player if they want to put their name on a poster or if they want to make a cameo? And a lot of it was more just them trying to find ways to market their thing. So a lot of people were jumping at it. So we really felt strongly that if we didn't have some kind of plan early on of how we were going to sort of, go the other direction and be taken serious, we really have to avoid that at all costs. So we had representation early on. A lot of the reps that we had were kind of frustrated with us because they kept giving us quote unquote layups of entry into it. And we just felt strongly early on that if we went down that road, we were going to be typecast as only producers that did sports related stuff. And obviously, being the nerd that I am and the comedy lover he was, we felt like, well, since we're already doing this other thing full time, let's just take our time. We started in 2016 with kind of the idea that we would spend the next 4 or 5 years just really trying to find mentors, trying to meet people, trying to really understand where we could. The sports thing got us in the room, but we knew we were going to have to work and put the same kind of work ethic we did in our respective sports careers to stay in it and to be taken serious. And so we felt like anything, if you can sort of approach it from a very honest point of view where you don't have all the answers, you don't know everything, and just sort of be sponges and really learn as much as you can, we could be that much more dangerous when we really kind of press play on it. And so that's what we did. We resisted sort of doing the easy thing and didn't produce anything for a long time. But I mean, every off season, Blake and I would come in and we'd meet with 1 million writers, we'd meet with 1 million producers, we meet with 1 million executives, and we'd just start to kind of formulate our own thesis of how we could best sort of make a big impact and kind of stay in it.
You mentioned mentors that you've had to find along the way. Who else has been an active participant in helping you guys build this and guiding you through this industry shift besides Thomas Tall?
Early reps, Bill Zotti, who was our agent at CA's and a manager. He's somebody who, again, was somebody early who understood what our mission was and what we wanted to do and sort of took us off the obvious path. A few producers that we started working with early on. Taylor Brigham's one that was always really great and generous and, didn't just sort of involve us as like ride-along producers, but really not only was very generous with his time and his vast experience of all kinds of successes and not so great movies that he was part of, but really, allowed us in the creative process in a way that we got to use a lot of the ideas and things. And I will say, and this is just for any kind of field and especially in parenting, like Blake and I talk early on that a big part of our success was always coaches or parents or family who sort of really pushed us and believed in us. I mean, because it's such a rocky road to, try to accomplish anything, and especially to have a long career in something. And so a lot of these people that we named, even Thomas early on, they were so generous not only with their time, but in really backing us and really letting us know that they believed in us. And I know that sounds cheesy, but it's so helpful because it is really hard. And especially it's hard when you are an outsider and you have a lot of people telling you the opposite of what you should be doing, or that you shouldn't be doing it, or that this is the right way to do it. And so Blake and I have really enjoyed being around people who have been not only tremendous resources, but also incredibly supportive.
What's some of the worst feedback you got early on? People telling you what you should be doing.
I mean, I think there's so many different areas in entertainment you can obviously get into that, for us, like we talked about, we had day jobs, quote unquote. So we just wanted to focus on what we were passionate about. Like I said earlier, this is very much a passion thing. So, sometimes people were trying to get us to take this project or just, like you said, giving us these layups, and that just wasn't our whole goal when we started this, and sort of our thing that we always come back to is like, would we watch that? It's that simple. And if the answer is yes, then we're all in. I mean, we had our first conversation about White Men Can't Jump in 2017, and it survived a Disney-Fox merger or acquisition. Started shooting May of 2022. So we quickly learned that like the people you go into business with, like you have to really enjoy being in business with them because you're talking to them so much. These projects can last forever. The movie didn't come out till May of 2023. So 6 years before anybody even saw this project that we first started talking about. So having the passion for it is so important. And once we hear an idea, if it's like, all right, I would watch that. That's like the first step for us, and like, okay, this is something we know we're gonna be dedicating a lot of time to. And Ryan said earlier, I think work ethic for us was like, that was one thing that we tried to take from sports to starting this company is, making sure that you're in the meetings, you're making phone calls, you're following up with emails, you're connecting the dots on certain things. So just spending a lot of real time building out this company has been an important factor for us.
Yeah. I mean, it's evident that this is clearly very passion-driven for you guys, and as you're transitioning from one very single-minded, focused career into a totally different hard left, how difficult was that just from a conceptual standpoint in terms of how you spend your day-to-day time? How do you make that decision and then go with it? And how uncomfortable is it in the beginning? Like, what did you do to get comfortable with this new path?
I think, for us, another carryover was probably resiliency. Like sports is something that over a long period of time, you have a lot of failures. You get embarrassed a lot. And so you sort of build a callus to that in a way that is helpful, especially in this business where you're told no a ton, or you're sort of like eyeball rolled a ton, or you're given bad advice, or people are so matter of fact about what are you doing? Why are you doing it this way? You shouldn't do it this way. And I think the hardest part for us was just figuring out what our routine is. That's the downside about coming from sports, is that we are so structured as athletes. Like everything there's a schedule, you do what you're told, you're like a soldier. It's like you show up at 6 a.m. for workouts, you have film session at 10 a.m., we have practice at 1, then we have more film session later. And so it's really easy to show up to those points and then give it your all and then go home and turn it off. But, I mean, this is more entrepreneurial, especially on the producing side. You make your own hours, you are hustling, and it's not a 9 to 5. And then also, when you have no idea how to go about it, it's kind of scary. So I think that's why I think we had the intuition really early to not jump into it full steam ahead, and to really, we said two things. We said, we're never going to beat the stigma if we produce sports stuff out of the gate, and we're not going to know what to do unless we really kind of take our time and meet and learn and talk to a lot of different people. And so the first 4 years we sort of said that's what we were going to do, and that's what we did. And it's still evolving for us. I mean, every year it's evolving, and we're finding new ways that we're becoming more additive, and we're really sort of honing in on what our strengths and weaknesses are. And it's been fun, too, to sort of bring an outside perspective. I mean, that's the one good thing about being an outsider, is we sort of get to kind of do the thing where you get to ask why until somebody doesn't have a good answer, and they just go, well, that's just how it's always done. And so that, for Blake and I, that's an exciting opportunity. And then early on, we got to kind of play the dumb jock thing, too, where we knew we would get in trouble if we did something. So we were like, let's see how far we can go with it until people don't believe us and saying, nah, I don't think that's, I think you guys know exactly what the rules here are.
Can you share any of those specific examples?
Yeah, there's just like, I mean, it's not a rule or a law, but there's sort of an etiquette on how you go about getting to people, or how you go about, like mostly representation and who you're supposed to talk to and who you're supposed to run things by. And then even at the studio side, it's like there's like 10 floors of people that get you all the way to the top. And so we found ways to kind of go to the top floor, or we found ways to go directly to the person we were trying to talk to without talking to the reps. And we got a lot of angry phone calls and people who would call us and lecture us and threaten us about nobody would ever work with us again if we ever did that again. And we played that for a good year and a half of like, we just don't know how it works. I'm just a dumb jock. I don't know. I didn't know that was a rule.
I think early on too, getting back to what we sort of learned about ourselves, like how we work and how we work well. I mean, we do this with each other all the time, but just like being as straightforward as possible, it cuts out so much wasted time. I mean, there's so much tiptoeing.
So much tiptoeing in Hollywood.
And it truly wastes time. So we always tell everybody, we kind of joke about it, but it's like, look, we come from a world where you have a game and then the next day you sit and film for 2 hours and a coach just berates you. So it's like, and you hear it, you accept it, and you move on. So like, we always kind of tell people like, hey, like we have no ego in this. If something's not working, if something's wrong, if we can be better, just tell us. And I think that's been huge for us in our relationships with other producers or studios, whatever it is, just because when you give people like that green light, like, hey, you're not gonna offend me, just be honest and let's cut out, 35 minutes of this hour-long meeting trying to tiptoe around a subject, I think has been huge for us, like a huge time saver. And that's kind of one thing I hope people start doing more and more, just because, we're all trying to make stuff that's great, and wasted time is wasted time.
Do you find that still applies? I mean, you obviously how you perform on the court or on the field, you've conditioned yourselves to watch the tape, hear the berating, adjust, play the next game, right? Do you feel like when you have a project, a creative project, or is your sensitivity still the same, or do you find that it's a different thing to hear for your own experience of whether something's working or not, and how do you gauge your success at it?
Go ahead.
It's so different because in sports, there's much more highs and lows that you get to sort of capture in any given week and any given season. And so in film and television, it's such a long road trip. I mean, and that's, to Blake's point about loving the people that you're going to be working with. I mean, you're on projects for a long, long time. And in sports, you fail, but you get an opportunity to sort of, recapture that moment and to redeem yourself. And then the other thing is just it's a lot more binary in sports. You have a performance, you either played well or you didn't. You have a score, you either won or you didn't. So there's metrics for you to be able to kind of judge where you are. And in storytelling, it's an art form, and so it's a lot more subjective. Whether critics like the thing you're doing or not, it doesn't really matter. It matters what the audience thinks, and vice versa. So it's hard because if you have something that doesn't work, it's a long time before you get to take another shot. And also, there's the fear of, if you string together a few things that don't work, then are you going to get another shot at it? And so, and we've also seen that around us, just in people that we've got to collaborate with, and especially people that we feel like have incredible track records and really, really deep resumes way over us. And the few projects that we've sold a ton of stuff over the past 6-7 years, but we only got a handful made. So, I mean, it's really, we thought that was sort of the peak, was like once you sold something, you were in it. Yeah. And that was like so exciting. And then it was like, oh, no, the hardest thing is getting the green light. Yeah. You're one of 100 people who have things in development all over the town. So to get something made is such a feat, and it's such a miracle. And there's so many factors that go into it. And then there's so many factors that go into something that is great, you know? So getting it made is one thing, and then making it great is a whole nother feat in and of itself. And there's so many factors, and it's such a huge team collaboration. And so, I mean, that's the space that we do really, really well in, and that we do enjoy the most. But the getting to the next thing, it is such a long journey, and that's such a departure for us being athletes, because you really get a lot more frequency in terms of getting a chance to do it again.
It looked like you had something that when something got bought but not made. Is there a little heartbreak
stupid
there?
comment, but I was thinking about it because you'll sell a project and then it'll hit the trades and somebody will hit you and be like, hey, congratulations, and it's like it's like starting a marathon, and right when you start, somebody's like, hey, congrats on the marathon, and it's like, I haven't done it yet. You know what I mean? Like it's a weird thing because you feel some sort of accomplishment, sense of accomplishment, but it's just such a long process. But I think that's kind of the thing that we love. Like you said earlier, like we all played sports to get to like the playoffs, right? And like that season is just a marathon, right? And you have to do all those little things to build up, to be prepared, to be able to put yourself in the right position to win a championship or to do well in the playoffs. So for us, we kind of look at it the same way. When you start a project, it's like we can't skip any details. We can't get bored with this process. We have to fall in love with like the tedious, boring things in order to make something that's great. So it's the selling a project thing is always funny to me now, because looking back after we sold the first one, I was like, buddy, we did it. Like, we're producers, and it's just not true, you know?
I love that you have to fall in love with the tedious, boring things. Yeah.
Yeah.
Speaking of that, I think it's really interesting. You both are very hands-on producers. I think that's something you really pride yourselves on. So in the process of producing, developing, licensing, whatever it is that you're exploring, what's something specific that you just gravitate towards, that you just love? Is it being on set? Is it putting the team together? Is it getting into the nitty-gritty of the budget with the line producer? Like, what's your thing?
I think a lot of it for us, and I'll let Blake share his favorite thing, but it all stems from this kind of entry point that we came into of having to prove ourselves as being more than just athletes in this field, and that we had a lot of value to bring. So we probably overly produce in certain matters, but I think for us, like, we really strive and love when we come to a problem or somebody's so matter of fact about something can't be done, and we just light up. It's such a fun challenge for us to go out and try to prove that we can go get that thing done. We can go acquire that piece of IP. We can go get that talent. We can prove to you that there's an appetite for this particular thing, even though it didn't do well and the metrics say it's not a popular thing. So,
Is there one of those you can share?
Yeah, Hello Tomorrow was one. I mean, that was an idea we came up with in-house, and I was always such a big fan of retrofuturism, and I always had this idea of entering that world in a sort of like Glengarry Glen Ross way. I thought that would be interesting. The salesman doc from the 60s, I always found super interesting, and I thought, what a fun character piece to study a salesman in that era, but have the kind of dressing of a cool retro sci-fi. And so early on, we brought it to our reps and a couple folks we knew around town at the studio side, and just it was a lot of confusion, and a lot of it stemmed from, well, it's not based on anything, and what is your track record, and no one's ever going to make this, and what is it? And so we just got energized pretty quickly. Instead of saying, okay, I think we should look at something else, we just started asking friends and again, going back to mentors and saying, how would you do this? And even then, even mentors too would sometimes be like, they would be a lot more polite, but sort of maybe there's some credence to it. Not go do sports things, jocks, but maybe if you like that space, maybe go try to find a book or go try to find a thing. And we were just kind of like, we were on this path of wanting to do something original and something that we sort of came up with in-house. And so, yeah, we spent a year and a half and really took a lot of advice on how we could sort of help bridge the vision of what we were talking about, and not having the experience to really make it a no-brainer. And so, yeah, we did that. We put a ton of resources into it in terms of like a package, and we spent a lot of time with our writer buddies who ended up show running it, and they really helped us build it out. And then the light bulb came on, and then it was such a fun experience to go around town and to talk about it and get a different response, and then for Apple to take a chance on it was so fulfilling. And then we were hooked. So we've been ever since, we're still playing within the system of, the studios are really trying hard to find risk-averse projects, and a lot of that is stemmed in IP, which is why we get a lot of sequels and reboots, and I get it. There's a built-in audience for that stuff, and then obviously we're looking at things that haven't been discovered yet, whether they're books or adaptions of things that had a fan base at some point but never saw the screen. And then again, just really, we have a whole tranche of projects that are original ideas that we're fighting for, and again, being told it won't work because, and it just gets us more excited. And so we're pumped for a lot of those.
I'll show you what won't work. Yeah.
Exactly right.
Yeah. One thing that I found that I loved, and this I transferred this over sort of from sports. I always tell younger guys towards the end of my career, as I got older, I always tell younger guys, when you come into the facility, speak to everyone, say good morning, talk, if it's the janitor, if it's a salesperson who happens to be in the building that day, speak to everyone, get to know everyone's name, try to remember people and appreciate what they're doing, because they're doing stuff that's sometimes thankless, especially our trainers. They have worse hours than we do. They're always on call. They're always there. They're taking us to doctor's appointments. If a guy's rehabbing, they're spending time with him. So for me, being on set, especially with White Men Can't Jump, I really found joy in going around and getting to know the wardrobe department, the lighting guys, the grips, the security, that not just going and talking to the director, not just talking to the actors, but making sure everybody knows that you care and that you give a shit about them. I think people just want to know that you appreciate what they're doing, and also having a point of view when somebody comes to you and asks you, hey, what do you think about these 3 things? Not saying it doesn't matter. No detail is too small, and that's something I learned from some of the greats, like Kobe Bryant. The one thing I learned from him is he would spend hours on just some minute piece of footwork that would be so boring to people, to drill that over and over and over. And it's the same in any field. I think the more successful you are, the more you care about the smallest detail. It's no stone is left unturned. So for me, that was really, really fun on the set of White Men Can't Jump. It's just getting to know everybody, because it's kind of it's almost like a school, right? If something goes wrong, you hear the gossip. And the more people you know, the better relationships we have with people. You can correct mistakes. You can fix something. If we cut something for the last half of the shoot, and people were upset about it, made their job easier. Finding out about something like that and being able to correct it makes the work environment easier. And when people are happier, they do better work. So I think just getting to know everyone was a side of producing that I didn't really appreciate until I got into it.
I imagine that's a big, strong corollary with having experience being on a team and understanding the value of each person and what they contribute, and knowing that it's not any one person who's going to solve the problem or win the game or whatever. Yeah,
professional sports, I say this about coaching, but coaches, I don't know, a good percentage of their job is just managing egos. And we all have egos, whether we believe it or not, to a certain degree, right? And I don't say that as a bad thing, all these guys have these huge unmanageable egos, but in every line of work, you're trying to do your job to the best of your ability. So when that gets compromised, being able to come in and fix situations and bring people together, and learning how to talk to people was one thing that I went on a quest. After my second year, I was 22, but I felt like I was sort of a leader on the team, and I called a lot of people, and I actually talked to Tim Duncan, and he told me something one time that has always stuck with me. And it might seem obvious, but it wasn't at the time. Because I always thought as a young guy I had to be the guy that spoke in every huddle, and I did this and I did that. And he goes, dude, a leader is not the guy who talks the loudest. It's not the guy who slaps the floor. It's not the guy who always goes and scores 30. It's at the end of the game, when everybody's looking to how are we going to react to the situation, when shit hits the fan, how calm are you, and who is looking at who to be that leader. And I learned early on that some guys I can go, hey, what was that? Come on, let's go, let's be better. Or some guys I got to put my arm around them and be I love that, let's try this. You just learn how to talk to people, and you learn how each person ticks, And I think I didn't appreciate that early enough in my career in college and in the MBA, but that's something I really tried to get better at, and that's like another thing you can kind of transfer over.
Oh, that's great. I think it's already quite clear that you guys are here really making films and TV projects, and this is not just another slap a name on an executive producer athlete vanity project. So what are some other ways you feel like Mortal Media is really differentiating from your backgrounds that we've just heard a lot about into what you're actually putting on screen now?
I think we signed a first look deal with Sony, and last year was the first year of our deal, and we happened to come on the lot at the same time as the writer's strike, and so there wasn't a lot for us to do.
Perfect timing.
It was kind of us walking around the lot a bunch and trying to figure out, okay, well now what's next?
Ryan joined the basketball league, just absolutely dominating. If you guys want to see some good basketball, come to the Sony lot.
He's not joking, but anyways. So we felt like, okay, well, what can we do with the spare time? It felt like it was gonna, finish up and resolve itself, and then it felt like, no, it's actually not. It feels like it's gonna be a long time. And so it ended up being a blessing in disguise because we got to know a lot of the folks around Sony, a lot of the decision makers, and so we got to really kind of hear what they were looking for, but also what they felt like where the state of the business was going. And so part of those discussions always, especially at the studio level, is bringing costs down and finding ways to be more efficient. And I think it was like right around the time AI just started becoming a really big conversation. And so Blake and I, we get a lot of sort of deals that come across our desk, and people looking for money to invest in startups. And there was one that came across from a friend who knew I loved stop motion animation and thought I'd be interested in hearing from this group out of New Orleans called Swaybox. And Swaybox was this really, really cool, scrappy group of craftspeople and puppeteers and people who'd worked on huge stop motion projects and puppet projects. And they found a really cool way, just out of necessity, to sort of blend some of these emerging like machine learning technologies with their puppetry craft, and they sort of created a really cool aesthetic that I had never seen before. And the way they have done the reel, which we'll show in a little bit, there's a little bit of a magic and mystique to it where you're just, and it was on purpose, where you're just sort of dying to know, like, how is this done? Like, what is the magic trick? And when you get in and you see it, it's pretty simple, but it's also not something that can be replicated because it really does rely on these artists to sort of be behind the thing, and the tools that they sort of created in-house or that were already existing that they used were just sort of tools that were enhancing the art that they were producing. And Blake and I really fell in love with that. I think too, because it was at the height of a lot of the writers talking about AI taking over and also taking from things that were already produced and out there, and so the kind of idea of stealing art and ownership over it, they were using it in-house within their own art, so it wasn't pulling from outside, and it was just so cool the way that they went about it. And so Blake and I led a huge investment round to sort of continue to help them grow and become more efficient. And the bonus side of what they were doing was, not only was it a really cool, unique aesthetic, but it was also super cost effective, and the production time was a fraction of traditional animation. So, usually like the Pixar style stuff you see, they can produce like 3 seconds of animation a week, and they were producing 3 minutes a week. And it's also all done live. It's live performance. And so we were so blown away. We were in right away. And when we started having early conversations, because we had a slate of animation projects we were trying to get off the ground, well, now coupled with this group, it was very, very enticing to the studio side. And so we have a couple projects now that we're doing, and they have a few huge projects that predated us that are really, really amazing. They have one with Matt Reeves that I can't wait for them to be able to talk about. That's really, really cool. And then a couple other really prestigious filmmakers. And then on our side, on the Mortal side, we have 2 projects that we're so excited about. And again, our goal was during that strike to find ways to be more additive, and this was kind of our way to do it rather than just continuing to develop the traditional way. And the bets paid off, and we were able to move the needle and get projects moving a lot faster than if we would have tried to go find an animation house.
That's really good. I think we have a clip that we can play so you can see this magic that Ryan's just described in any second.
Hopefully I didn't overhype it.
Like, man, this sucks.
It's Helvetica, right? That's the whole. Do we have that clip? I think what you just mentioned, Pixar. There's precedent here for investing in a technology that you can have sort of a symbiotic actual business value add from. So you've described the reduction in costs, efficiency, and time. But also now you have an investment and a part ownership of this company that is creating something of value that will ultimately live outside of mortal media. So that's very, very cool. Let's check it out. Very unique. I want to know how it happened. So what's really cool about that, in addition to it sort of being this potential revenue stream for you down the road as well, it's a creative investment strategy outside of what's happening on the screen. Are there other ways you guys are looking to expand what Mortal Media can do that is, from an investment standpoint, that's not just about what you're creating?
Yeah, 100%. That's something that Ryan and I talk about a lot. Obviously, Swaybox is one of those things, but getting a little bit more creative with how we control the IP that we come up with in-house, and sort of changing like that traditional model of come up with an idea, build out a pitch, go pitch to a studio buys it, you do the whole thing. Trying to skip some steps here and there. I think it's important for us. I mean, we had one of our favorite projects we sold to Paramount maybe 4 or 5 years ago. I went through 2 regime changes at Paramount, didn't survive the last one, and now it's just kind of there. And it's like, that's one we talk about all the time. We're like, man, like, if we could have done that differently. So just like learning from our mistakes in the past, I think is how we're trying to get a little bit more creative, and be a little bit more forward thinking, because the film and TV industry is changing rapidly each day. I mean, we saw it with streamers, but now it's starting to flatten out, and not all movies are theatrical anymore. So really getting creative around our IP, I think, is what we'll be focusing on besides our projects. That's something we'll be focusing on, just to have a little bit more control, and not be able to just be hamstrung by decisions that you can't make yourself.
In terms of that, as you are looking to make additional investments that are going to be sort of from kind of like a symbiotic VC entrepreneurship perspective, what kinds of things are you looking into? I think you've mentioned AR, VR technology is very interesting to you. What is it that sets a technology, for example, apart as something that not just could be a creative impact for what you're trying to do, but also is it, from your perspective as investors, of value?
Yeah, I think everybody always looks back and in hindsight, there's the kind of wishful thought of, man, I wish I could have been at the ground floor when these sort of industry trends were happening and the industries were changing. And so I think you're seeing a lot of that. The one that I really feel strongly about, that I'm sure a lot of people do, is AR, VR. I think obviously Apple coming in with the Vision Pro is the first step in that. And so it's been really interesting and fun to kind of explore, well, what does storytelling look like in spatial computing and in that kind of space? So we've been really trying to study it and figure it out. And then also, I think there's going to be a lot of problems that need answers in terms of the tech side. One of them I do think is going to be streaming in 3D, so spatial computing, streaming, and there's a couple companies that we were looking at, and there's one that got into that is solving that problem right now. That's really, really exciting, and so they're doing stuff with point clouds and finding ways to really, because right now, if you wanted to download a movie that was done in 3D, or not 3D, but in a kind of spatial environment, you'd have to download it. And these would be very, very large files. It would be like if you were on Instagram or TikTok and every time you wanted to watch a video, you had to download it first. So I think that's going to be a problem that needs to be solved. And there's a company that we're working with right now. We've been actually, the demos have been so amazing. There's one we're building right now of Blake teaching you how to shoot a free throw that I forced him to do.
I also realized that I wasn't a great free throw shooter, so he asked me to do this. I wasn't like, oh, I'll teach free throws. But it's a really cool idea, and it's a really cool project, but
that's just one. It just felt like an obvious case study in terms of, masterclass. I think everybody is familiar with, and everybody's watched a masterclass course. And Steph Curry has a great one about how he goes through the game and his shooting mechanics. But I thought the next step of that, which would be interesting, would be instead of relying on wherever the camera's set up and what they want you to look at, how amazing would it be to be immersed in that and to pause Blake and to walk around and to see exactly. And part of that just comes from my own way that I learn, which is I'm such a visual learner, and I could have a coach tell me a million things, but unless he could show me, I can't really pick it up. I just got into golf recently, and again, it's like having somebody there showing you and being able to walk around and see it from all the different angles, I just thought was a no-brainer for something like this. So to have access to that, but it takes a lot of data and it takes a lot of computing power to do, and so it's been really fun getting to not only build this thing out, but to be able to potentially solve a problem that I think we could, in success, get to be rewarded in.
Yeah, so if you want to be a mediocre free throw shooter, just, check this video out. You'll make like 50% of them.
Have either of you, did you use virtual reality training technology for playing any of that?
No, they tried dabbling in it, but just wasn't there.
Yeah.
And I think it's getting to a place. I think, I don't think this is going to be the version, this first generation, but I think a few generations down. There's also some other companies we're not involved with that we got to see some pretty incredible immersive demos, and it's just such a green light to me in terms of where all this is going, and it's also scary too. I think there's going to be an addictive quality to it that's kind of scary, and so just even again, like finding out how to solve those problems is super fascinating to us.
As you look ahead, in addition to sort of the technological developments, like what are some stories, dream partners, other filmmakers, collaborators, platforms you want to work with? Who stands out as like, this would be fucking awesome if we could make this happen?
There's a bunch of people that we would love to work with. Obviously, I grew up watching when I was sort of in high school, which I think we all kind of have a certain nostalgia for, especially comedy when you're in high school, because it's you're kind of just you're figuring out what is funny or what you think is funny, and so the Apatow films, Seth and Evan movies. Wedding Crashers, Old School, all those movies were to me, those are hard comedies. There's a joke on every single paragraph of every single page. In every scene, there's multiple jokes. And so for me, I love to just sit down and just watch and laugh. And I could be biased, and it feels like me just getting older, being they don't make them like they used to. But I want to bring back comedies that are just strictly so funny. I mean, I think we can all think back to movies that we've seen when we were younger. There's still some good ones coming out, but they're much fewer and far between. I feel like there was 3-4 good comedies coming out every year back in the golden days. So that's one thing that I'm determined to do. And I think it's just going to take one person to make a swing. And once that comedy is successful, I think that'll. Hopefully that will start the ball rolling.
Do you think that's platform specific at this point? Because there's so much happening in sort of the TV format and serialized or shorter format that it's just not happening in a 90-minute scene anymore?
Yeah, and I mean a lot of it's budget too, and going back to Swaybox, that's why we love that investment so much. Just being able to create the same type of film for a fraction of the cost is super important. I mean, we always joke, we'll have a project and you go and you pitch and they're like, what are you thinking for budget? And we always downplay it. We're like, oh, we could do this for like 15 million and it really should be 25. And they're like, can you do 5? I'm like, oh shoot. Like it's, everybody just is like trying to figure out how to make things for cheaper and obviously get more bang for their buck. So yeah, I mean the landscape of film and TV and pitching is funny because we go in and we pitch people and it feels like they don't know what they want, so it's impossible for us to do it. So you just kind of have to just throw a bunch of stuff out there and eventually something will stick. But we're bringing back hard comedies. That's what we're doing.
What about you? What's your dream next thing?
We've been lucky in the last 6 to 10 months and working with the people that we've been dying to work with for years, and again, we're in a position too where we're learning so much from them. So, I again, such a fanboy. Bad Robot's a place that we've talked to a bunch and tried to crack something with, and they've been warming up more and more to us. And again, like such great people that we've gotten to in the meantime. Really bug the hell out of and be sponges and just try to learn. These people that have been in the business a long time and have had a lot of success and understand not only the business side but just and how you tell stories. I think most people gravitate towards the things that they remember about their favorite films or TV shows, but it's not until you actually get in it that you see, well, there's a lot more thought that goes into it than just the sort of kind of surfacey thing that you remember about it, and it goes a lot deeper. And so that's been incredibly rewarding for us, is to really learn from these incredible storytellers that it's almost like a second language to them. And then for them to be so generous to us and to really sit down and break it down for us, like the dumb jocks we are, is just, it's just such a special thing, and hopefully we get to take that and carry it forward.
That's great. I think we are up on time, but I want to thank you guys so much for coming to South by Southwest, sharing your transition from sports to entertainment. Please give them a big round of applause.
Thank you guys.
Thank you all for being here.
Thank you.